Welcome. We are very happy to have you here. Welcome to the Building a Strong Sales Process, the relevance of targeting the right customers. My name is Jessica Strombach. I am the Managing Director of Dual Assets, one of the partners in this project, and we are very, very happy to be able to present this topic to you. Really what this topic focuses on is one of the central issues in the energy efficiency and indeed renewables industry, which is sales and engaging customers and closing deals. As all of us know who work here, as all of us know who work here, one of the central challenges that we face is indeed deal closure, where you will have a strong project, but it takes too long to really create the deals and grow our business. So this is the topic of today's discussion. And with that, I am happy to hand it over to the next speaker and really start us off. So welcome and thank you for being here.
Thank you, Jessica. Hello, everyone. My name is Anastasia, and I will be moderating today's webinar, and I'll be responsible for all the logistics. Now, before we start, let me tell you a few words about how we're going to work today. So first of all, if you have questions during the webinar, please just put them into the chat box, and we will answer them during the Q&A at the end of the webinar. Secondly, the webinar will be recorded, so you will be able to find the recording on the launch website after the webinar. Please make sure that you keep your phone next to you, because you will need to use it for an interactive poll that we will have as part of this webinar. And lastly, don't worry about the slides, because you will receive them afterwards. So everyone who registered for this webinar will receive them via email. Now, here are our speakers for today. That's myself, Anastasia, will be moderating. Then my colleague Bart de Volderen will be talking about the importance of customer segmentation. Afterwards, John O'Rourke, who is the CEO of the New Energy Group, will tell us more about the importance of having a good sales process. And lastly, Jessica, the Managing Director of Dual Assets, will talk about her personal experience with building a strong sales process. Our agenda for today looks like this. So we will have several blocks. As I mentioned, we will start with customer segmentation, then move to importance of sales process and the launch education program. Then hear Jessica's testimonial on the sales process, and then we will move to the panel discussion on the marketing and sales implications of COVID-19 and how having a good sales process can help you in these difficult times. And last but not least, we will conclude with the Q&A. Now, let's start with our first speaker, Bart, and I'll hand over control to you.
Okay, thank you, Anastasia. Also, a warm welcome from me to all of you in this webinar. Let me take you in the next 10 minutes through some key ideas with respect to targeting the right clients. And I'll start with a famous quote from Mark Twain, which is a great American writer and humorist. And if you look at that quote, it states, I cannot give you a formula for success, but I can give you a formula for failure, which is try to please everybody. So, for example, making the analogy, not shooting, you shouldn't shoot at every rabbit you see crossing your path, right? But we should acknowledge that there are different types of rabbits, fast and slow ones, for example, and focusing your efforts to, for example, the slow ones to be in the end more successful. And that's exactly what segmentation and targeting, the topic of this presentation, is all about, right? So the first step is, in fact, acknowledging that not every customer is the same. For example, for project developers, contracting for retrofitting university campus buildings, for example, with sustainable energy assets, that's very different from contracting towards retrofitting commercial office buildings managed by a commercial real estate services firm. Those are two different animals, right? Those are two different types of potential customers. But within such group of, for example, commercial office buildings managed by such a real estate services firm, there might be a lot of customers that think alike and have very similar needs. Similarly for universities, for example, a lot of universities have similar needs towards retrofitting their university campus buildings for more sustainability. They think more alike, they act more alike. So segmentation tries to sort out the different types of customers so that you have a clear visual picture of the different customer segments and the different groups of potential customers. So the point of segmentation is finding, in fact, relevant parameters to create meaningful groups of customers. Within the Launch Consortium and our research also guiding that, we identified quite some possible parameters to create such groups. And there might even more and other parameters than that you will see in this overview slide. So for example, you can look at potential customer size or even geographic location to see whether, for example, meaningful project sizes are possible with those potential customers, or how your local network, which is geographically related, may be helpful for approaching them. Size, geography, also industry help to easily identify potential customer groups, but you can and should go a little bit deeper in your segmentation approach. And client industry already offers, let's say, more than purely, for example, identifying potential customers. For example, if you look at end client industry, you might distinguish between national, regional, or public organizations. You might distinguish another group is there, the MUSH, so-called MUSH, municipalities, universities, schools, hospitals. That's a different group than national public organization. And the third one, for example, is commercial and industrial companies. Again, a different type of potential customers. So these different groups may have different needs and perhaps also needs towards marketing and sales approaches, different sales decision-making processes, etc. So, so that's an important indicator for, let's say, assessing your go-to-market approach, for assessing your sales approach towards different groups. But you can go further. You can go towards parameters that give you even more indications of the behavior or the needs of potential customers. For example, their maturity in performance contracting. So you can especially look for information on potential customer groups about their being oriented towards outsourcing, they're having whether it's legally possible to have operational leasing, and whether they have specialized personnel for processing performance contracting, for example. If you consider a group with low maturity versus a group with very high maturity, that's an important indicator and input for your decision making, who you want to target. So again, this type of parameter is more insightful, but is also more difficult sometimes to get information on. Similar, well, also parameters that give you more indications about potential needs of customers. So very important information to know for your marketing and sales approach could be indeed performance contracting maturity, but also, for example, how critical is the energy cost in their OPEX? How, what about their strategic positioning? Are they focusing very much on sustainability or only focusing on, for example, operational excellence, or on both? What is their relationship with the property? Are they an owner? Are they a manager of a building? Are they just a user and not owning the building? Those are interesting parameters to know up front and to see whether it's meaningful to split the large customer group into smaller, more specific customer groups based on such parameters. By the way, I'm not posing a specific polling question on this, but you can always, if you want, indicate in the chat which parameters you are using from this overview, or could also be other parameters that you are using today for trying to distinguish between different groups of customers. I'm always looking forward to seeing some input there in the chat on a potential segmentation parameters. But obviously, segmentation is just the first step, right? It's one thing to know the different groups. It's also very important to know who to target then from those different groups. What potential customer group is low priority? Which one is very high priority? The 2 dimensions help in that kind of decision. First, you have the end client segment attractiveness for project developers, which is driving your low versus high priority. For example, that can be influenced by the possibility for off-balance sheet financing for sustainable energy assets. Could be driven by a relatively short decision-making cycle. It's very interesting and more attractive for you as a project developer if the potential customer has a short decision-making cycle, or whether they might offer through their business, through their portfolio of buildings, access to large-scale contracts. So segment attractiveness is an important dimension driving your targeting exercise. A second dimension is related to the fit such a potential customer group has with your assets and competencies. For example, it can be driven by the experience of that potential customer group with off-balance sheet financing. It can be related to a strong CSR function and attitude of such a company. And it can be related to the comfortability of the potential customer group with performance contracting. So the more of these drivers are present in a certain customer group, we expect the more high priority these segments will be for you targeting those type of customer groups for large-scale aggregation of sustainable energy assets and building your project portfolio with that. So that's kind of the idea behind the targeting exercise. In the multitude of potential customer groups that you find the really most important ones to target, because everybody has limited resources to spend on marketing and sales. So you should target the groups that you think are most worthwhile to target and that you benefit most from. And the third step in this approach is, once you identified your customer groups, you really want to target high priority groups. Marketing best practice tell us to, in fact, vividly describe and visualize those priority target groups. That's what we call using personas. And a persona is, in fact, a visual and concrete description of a certain type of customers. A brief example based on previous TNO research, and by the way, we are also developing personas during launch and the research that we are doing. But based on previous research, an example on personas. And let's say you want to target a group of business owners for making their office or industrial building more future-proof with sustainable energy assets. Those business owners can differ quite heavily in their motivation for investing in such sustainable energy assets. For example, depending on their orientation on the now versus orientation on the future, they might differ a lot. And also, they might differ on their focus on either individual versus the collective. And based on that subdivision, we see 4 different types of potential customer groups. Dan, who is more likely a pioneer, and as long as it is innovative, he is in favor of it. Vera, who is more a calculator, she's thinking about what is the ROI, and she's more focused on today and the individual. Hans, who is more an opportunistic guy and who is waiting for the right initiative. And Jose, who is more the engaged type. What's the societal benefit for it? Those are 4 very different types of business owners that you might distinguish, and that you also need to create a feeling of how to target, how to create sales messages for them, and how to use marketing and sales approaches. So, for example, to show you a persona, if we take Dan, for each quadrant, we can make obviously a persona. For example, Dan, who is now having here a brief description of what that type of person is. Dan is brimming with new ideas, new concepts, new market opportunities. Sustainability for him, well, that's just do it. Don't have too much blah blah, just do it and act now. And he sees sustainability especially as offering new market opportunities. He's especially interested in sustainable investments when it's either innovative technology or either innovative business model approaches. That's a brief description of that. And such a description helps marketing and sales to focus storyline, to focus sales messages, to design marketing material, brief product designers, service designers for new features. So for example, in the future, you might ask yourself, before investing in certain new marketing material product features, what would Dan think about this? And that's in fact the key role of personas as a tool to use in your daily marketing and sales practice. So that's a brief presentation of how we currently are developing marketing and sales materials within the Launch Consortium to help project developers prepare for interacting very effectively and efficiently with potential customers to grow their sales pipeline. I'm happy also to give the floor now to John, who will talk more about the Launch Education program. Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's discussion on the Launch Education Program. First, I'd like to do a brief recap on the broader program and then move to Module 3, where I will discuss decision mapping in the context of understanding your customers and building a strong project pipeline. The key objective of the Launch Education Program is to broaden the understanding of project developers and contractors through published materials, webinars, and workshops in key areas of focus for the successful development and deployment of energy performance contracting in order to drive scale in the energy efficiency acquisition efforts in Europe. Anastasia, I'm having okay. We have organized our pursuit into 3 modules. As you can see on the screen, Module 1 is focused on the development of a standardized contract in which the main body of the document incorporates the needs and the wants of the customer, the financing institution, and the contractor in a manner that aims to capture all of the key stakeholder requirements in a deal. This is accomplished through the provision of practical and transparent contract language that ultimately speeds up the transaction time and, as a result, significantly reduces transaction costs. Module 1 also includes the risk assessment protocol. The purpose of the risk assessment protocol is to help the contractor or the project developer produce a comprehensive risk analysis that marries the project opportunity to a suitable investor early on in the development process, saving time and potential heartache for all later on. Should the project eventually be securitized, it now will not require an act of God to facilitate it, since all parties are, in a sense, co-authors of both the contract and the terms, and are assured that a robust risk analysis has already been constructed from the onset of the deal. Common language, co-authored risk analysis, and standardized contracts will help to greatly reduce time to deal closure and cost of both the initial financing and the eventual securitization, as well as, and most importantly, helping contractors and project developers to deleverage their balance sheets in a timely fashion so that they can continue to invest and grow their business. Module 2, which is access to growth capital, really focuses on helping developers and contractors access equity investment inside their companies. The use of a standardized company financial report in conjunction with the appropriate pitch template, which is specifically designed to target the right investor for this industry, can greatly enhance the prospect of attracting cost-effective growth capital for your company. I'm sorry, Anastasia, I don't have control here of these slides. Could you hand over control, please? Thank you. Which brings me to module 3. Understanding your customers and building a strong pipeline. This module aims to improve the understanding of the project developer and the contractor on the launch sales material. So that is the market segmentation process, the persona development, value prop creation, market messaging, and what we're going to talk about next, which is sales process design. Some of this has already been covered by Bart in the earlier speaking engagement. Just as in Module 1 and Module 2, Module 3 follows a systematic approach to the origination and development. For EPC contract development, origination and development are the areas in which most developers have struggled historically. A solid, systematic approach in sales and development, given the historically long lead times and sometimes complex contract negotiations due to the nature of the service that we are selling, is critical. To help in this regard, we have retained a sales company, the Decision Mapping Council, to conduct a world-class business development workshop in selling into this market. Today's webinar is to introduce this process in advance of a planned workshop later in the year for contractors and developers. The time and place, of course, are just, they're subject to COVID developments over the coming months. So the ideas presented here will be demonstrated and applied using real examples and actual situations. Of many current concerns that are out there in the marketplace today, a common pressing issue is, how do business development teams assure their messages are effectively designed, targeted, and timely? How can the risks and development of future projects and contracts be better determined? Okay, Anastasia, still struggling here. Can you please give me control? To create a competitive advantage, project developers and contractors must engage the customer decision process. Put another way, what are the customer decisions that will determine our success? How can we better engage and influence the decisions that are redefining and reshaping our markets? What is going on here? So we must ask ourselves, how well do we understand the customer decisions and the process by which such decisions are made? Well, one way is to equip teams with a tool that describes the customer decisions and the process by which those decisions are made. Understanding these customer decisions and their process are two elements of being an effective business development organization. And yet, most organizations assume that this is all just intuitive. It is not, but it can be learned. Understanding the decision dynamics explains the what, when, why, and how of sometimes inexplicable customer behaviors. Knowing the process and patterns driving these decisions equips teams to design more receptive messaging and choreograph the right actions and matching resources. Therefore, positioning the sales team to understand and manage the development risks as they proceed through a deal. Business development and communications become more effective when they are driven by a confident understanding of the underlying customer decisions. The ability to be consistently relevant is like an invisible thread that forms closer and stronger links through the customer's decision-making process. When viewed through the prism of decision-making, deal swings and customer behaviors make a lot more sense. Viewed as a set of decisions, customers are seen in a more objective and revealing light. Knowing decision dynamics and the observable patterns provides better control, lower risk, and predictable effects. Decision mapping is a template of how successful people and organizations behave, often intuitively. Mapping shows that behavior can be learned and used creatively and powerfully. Decision mapping offers business development teams a natural, non-prescriptive framework with clearly defined language and an accurate illustration of the customer's condition. This, in turn, makes the intended effect upon their decisions, that is, more predictable and easier to monitor and measure. Business development and sales activities are enhanced by adopting a particular focus on those decisions that determine specific results. Presented here is a long-established product used by teams in a diverse range of industries. It can be described as applied behavioral science for dummies. In practice, it delivers an elusively simple concept, excuse me, in an elegantly designed and an immediately useful package. It can be used independently by a specific company or on a project. General adoption by all team members establishes a powerful commonality and methodology. Team members interact to create proposals that are difficult to achieve individually. Creative and dynamic teamwork becomes the norm. The need in most cases is to form and manage multidisciplinary relationships at different levels with a more complex customer. Decisions about acquisition, regulation, capital, environment, investment, and in some cases, even politics, or in most cases, maybe politics, present an almost bewildering array of players and relationships. It's often difficult to separate meaningful signals from the noise. The decision mapping process offers a robust, consistent approach. When applied, it assures business development and sales activity is focused, decision-based, and of the highest relevance and quality. The effect of mapping is illustrated on this graph. So the y-axis is content, and content is your technology, it's your tangible product. Content is what the customer sees and experiences when they transact with you. It's really the sum of your market-facing resources. Examples of content are plant and equipment, offices, factories, engineering, materials. The x-axis is process, and process is decision-making or behavior. It's intangible, it's the most invisible part of your product or service offering, and process describes how things are done relative to your product. Examples of process would be developing and assessing ideas, exploring and verifying new technologies, authorizing and defining concepts, directing, redirecting, and recommending alternatives. External process describes your customer decisions made outside your business that directly affect your business every day. External process is measured on a scale of effectiveness. It is a measure of how effectively customer decisions are influenced. Internal process is to your left. This describes decisions that you make inside your business. Its measure is on a scale of efficiency, and it describes how efficient your internal operational decision making is. The focus of decision mapping is the external area described by the dashed lines on your screens. That area represents the product of what customers acquire and how they acquire it. So content and process is equal to your served market, or in another term, maybe your addressable market. 100 on each scale represents the total of your served market. A typical business profile is high on content and lower on process. A 90 on content and a 30 on process describes a high-tech market leading business, skillfully engaged in transactional customer relationships that knows their customer. So if you look at a 90 on content and a 30 on process, that would suggest 27% of its served market is realized. Such a business probably wins 1 in 4 major contracts, has a 27% market share, or perhaps margins in the lower quartile. Performance is okay, could be described as good, but it's not exceptional. But from our perspective, for folks that are operating in this business, that kind of result is not sustainable. Looking at the chart, where is the most potential for improvement? So, where do most businesses invest? Doubling or tripling your external effectiveness is an intelligent and invisible strategy that offers the most to gain. By extending along the external process axis, the effects are immediate. The customer's perception of your company's value is guaranteed to increase. By moving from 30 to 80 on process, a company's share of its served market increases 45%. So the question is, how do you move from 30 to 80? The answer is, invest in external process effectiveness. Learn and apply new patterns of behavior. Better and engage and influence the customer decisions that drive your success. Remember, it's the customer's decision that closes the deal. So by addressing 8 questions, an organization's behavior will move along the external process line. And by the way, this is really the focus of the workshop, is to explore the next 8 items in much more detail. So what are the customer decisions that we are in business to affect? What is the scope of these decisions for the customer? Who has a role in the decision of the scope? Where is the customer in their decision process? And what factors must we manage in order to win? What effect must we have on their process? Which messages and communication skills are going to be required? And what specific actions will implement this strategy? Decision mapping is a pure and robust tool for customer decision management. Its use is well documented, durable, and it's non-prescriptive. It's an empirically proven behavioral science that can be learned and applied. Once learned, a company's people, and salespeople in particular, but actually not just their salespeople, the engineering team, the structured finance teams, they experience a greater sense of confidence, and it encourages a more engaging and winning culture. So in closing, if you're interested in what we're in the workshop, if you're interested in participating in that workshop, which is primarily for contractors and developers, the decision mapping exercise, please indicate your interest early, as there are limited slots available and it's pretty popular. what will be covered is have an opportunity to sit in different tables with different groups of contractors, where we'll be able to assess the maturity of existing sales processes, learn and apply powerful customer perspectives to different situations, identify and engage the decisions that drive growth strategies. And really, what we're really always after is targeting and closing leads with the highest chance of success and exiting high risk, low return projects early. So with that, I'd like to thank you very much for your time and your company on this afternoon's call, and I will hand you back to Anastasia.
Thank you so much, John, for your insightful part. And now we are ready to move on to Jessica and her experience of improving the sales process within Joule Assets.
Thank you very much. And I am not as yet able to move the slides. Now I can, I think. Okay, great.
Okay.
So thank you very much for having me. This is a very important topic. Launch per se is mostly focused on accessing finance and preparing projects to be able to access finance. But I would say, just as far as what is commercially important to all of us within this group, it's sales. Sales is where it's at. Without improving how quickly you're able to close projects, you're never able to grow your business. So I'm happy to be able to give just a personal experience of our own journey with this in Joule Assets. To give you a little bit of background, Joule Assets at one point was an energy efficiency financial fund here in New York, and we bought an ESCO and went through this process with them. And so my talk is really about that experience. To give you a little bit of background, of course, in Europe there are many ESCOs. There's a lot of activity. We need to be tripling or quadrupling our level of activity in order to meet our own climate targets. And we're nowhere close to doing that. And one of the main barriers is the fact that many projects take between 6 months to a year to close. And if they're public projects, they take even longer. And that is just a very damaging, expensive process. So anything a company can do to shorten that process and improve their results is going to pay back significantly. Yeah, let's see if I can move this slide. No, I cannot. There we go. Just to say, this is an EU project. These are the partners. You're welcome, please, to go to our website anytime and learn more. And our focus is on creating contracting, creating risk assessment, and supporting with company growth by helping companies develop their sales pipeline and close further projects. Within Joule, where does this talk come from? So, as I mentioned, in 2000, and I believe it was 1716, Joule ran a small energy efficiency financial fund based out of New York and bought an ESCO. This ESCO was specialized in offering a fully financed insured package of energy efficiency under an energy performance contract, very much the type of contract that we're now standardizing within Launch. And what we provided were energy efficiency upgrades for commercial clients. Our target size of project was small. 75,000 was our target. Some were larger, some were smaller, but basically that's what we look for. And we were focused on lighting, air conditioning, ventilation, heating and controls of the building. And obviously, when you do that, the key is to aggregate projects and to close quickly, because when your project size is only $75,000, you cannot spend forever closing those deals, because you simply will use up all your revenue in your closing costs. Now, we were able to, because we were taking over the building controls, and really we took the energy management risk. So we would take over the controls of the building, the heating and ventilation controls, and we would really manage the energy for that building. Because this was the case, our margins could be quite good, because we offered a real ongoing service. So we put in the technology, but then after that, a big part of what we offered was the service, that the company no longer needed to worry or think about their energy needs at all. JewelSmart was going to handle it, or handled it for them. Okay, so when we took this company over, they were closing between 1 and 2 projects a month, which is absolutely not enough, but is more than plenty of ESCOs close in reality. When we completed the project, the process that John just went over with all of you, or named, which is really looking at our clients from the perspective of a decision-making process on their side, broke down the steps in that process, stopped relying on the intuition and the talent of our sales personnel, and really turned it into an analyzed, focused process, our sales closures went up to between 4 and 5 a month. And this was with the same personnel, the same offering. Now, at that point, we sold the company, but they had the potential to increase it even further beyond the 4 or 5 closure number. So it really did make a very significant difference. And it was the before and after, right? So I'm just going to go through, John went through the theory of what you're doing, which is analyzing your client from and your entire offering from a decision-making point of view, and looking at each step of how to move to the next step, how to break down what you are doing at that point in the process, and to whom you are speaking. So he provided a little bit of that theory, and the work will be discussed further in our workshop, and I strongly encourage people to take the time to learn this, because it is the thing that really can change your closure rate, at least from my personal experience. And just please remember, we're not earning anything extra for offering this. So when I'm telling you this, it's really, this is what I've noticed myself. And we're paid in an EU project to give this type of service. So that's what we're doing. But there's not as if any of us here are getting paid for pushing a particular solution. It is what we have found to be useful ourselves. So let me just go through a couple of the things, sort of what it means when you are adopting the type of process that John outlined for us. What does that look like? Now, keep in mind that you really do need a workshop on this. And it is not a quick update to how people, generally speaking, work. So this is just very high level, and we will be providing more information later during the workshop and then beyond the workshop. But let's just do a little bit of a before and after. So before, when we bought the company, they really saw themselves as a technical energy saving provider, right? And we sold energy savings. Salespeople were really responsible for their own messaging. We hired salespeople because they had networks within the area of potential clients, and we just let them at the clients, like, go for it, do your best, bring the clients in. Well, what happened there is as soon as the salespeople ran out of old contacts, they no longer were able to sell, because they didn't have a functional process, they just had relationships, right? So you couldn't grow beyond the personal contacts of whoever it was you hired, which is just not useful. And we really saw clients as a single entity. So we're going to talk to that hotel, or we're going to talk to that office block. We didn't break that entity down into different levels of people who each have a decision-making role and who will be part of the decision-making process and who need a specific set of sales messages or a specific set of information in order to take that decision that they need to take in this chain of decisions that client will take. And I'll come back to this to say what we did after. Okay, then the other thing, just to do a little bit more on the before, we did not have, everybody knew their job, but we did not have a sales, contracting, internal contracting, external contracting, reaching out to the installers, end-to-end detailed process of who's sending what email, when, what's the message to that level of person within the commercial entity that you're talking to, like a really, really, really detailed step-by-step process for the sale. Now, what that meant is that we kept losing time, and time is money, right? So somebody would forget to send the follow-up email, or the person who was supposed to take over next wouldn't be messaged until the Monday after because somebody found out on Thursday and forgot on Friday. Nothing's automated. You're calling, someone's just relying on their talent to call someone. They don't really know their position within the company, and they're winging it, they're guessing. So then they need to call back. Like, you're not efficient. And that was eating into our margins, right? So even when we would do a sale, we would have earned less from that sale, and we would lose more sales just from having getting confused with ourselves through this process. Because it's one thing handling 5 or 10 clients at a time. It's another if you're really trying to build a pipeline and you've got 30 or 40. You can no longer rely on people's memories. We were not measuring the time it took from one step to the next. So we didn't know exactly that, we tend to have a 10-day delay between the audit and the follow-up meeting, or that tends to be a sticking spot. So maybe we should organize the follow-up meeting before we even conduct the audit. Stuff like that, where because we weren't measuring from one step to the next, the resource that step took and the time it required and what the problems tended to be. We weren't tracking that regularly. We missed a lot of opportunities for improving that process. And then we had, some decisions around the contract. When do you lock the client in? Because part of sales is to know when to stop selling. Like, this is not going to be a good lead. Let's test it, and if necessary, kill it quickly, because otherwise we just lose more money. So when you do the type of work that John's talking about, which is break your sales down into as a decision-making, non-intuitive process where you have done the analysis, you have done the work of really figuring out every single step in your process and breaking down the people in each organization according to their role and according to the decision they will take, and then put that together and analyze it so that you can improve your efficiency. That whole work is something that we will look to develop together during our workshop, which all of you are invited to, but please do keep in mind spaces actually are limited because there's only so many companies you can do this with at one time. There's a huge amount of interest. We'll try and figure something else out, but that is the work we'll be doing then, which hopefully many of you will participate. But this is some of the end results. So after we had done that work of breaking down the company, breaking down our process, really, really thinking each one through and not just relying on the talent of the team and how people felt that day, this were some of the things that we had done. So we had created a service offering. We were selling a customer experience. We were not selling savings. We sold people the idea that they could have a smart building for free because we were providing the financing. So they could just they had no work to do. They signed an agreement. Their building would be more efficient, more comfortable, and smart for free, right? So it was a technological upgrade, not an energy save. We had a practiced sales pitch that was gone over for weeks, thought through meticulously, and done according to who we were speaking to within the organization and what decision they needed to take to move us along in that decision-making process, right? So it was much, much, much more thought out and refined. And then we would test it and then come back and refine it further. Again, broken down the client according to role and according to where they were and what their responsibilities were and what impact they would have on the project. I need to move the slide again, if that would be possible. Thank you. And then to improve the audit, clear, detailed, end-to-end marketing, sales, and delivery process described in every step and measured by every step in order to just continuously improve the efficiency, which is a big piece of work and very, very useful to have. And then we look to close the agreement and create a short but binding agreement early in the process so that we weren't spending so much time if the client wasn't actually that promising. There is obviously a great deal of work to do to achieve all of that, to think through all of that, but these were some of the results for us. And like I said, it had a real impact on our own results. So I would encourage you to join the workshop if you're interested. And otherwise, of course, we have other resources within Joule, within Launch, which really focus also on engaging financial funds. Financial funds like to see this type of process. The standard contracting and the standard process help them finance. So it also helps with gaining access to insurance. So it supports both ends of the scale. Thank you very much for me.
Thank you so much, Jessica, for sharing this success story. I just shared the link where you can express your interest in joining the workshop in the chat box. So please leave your details there. And if you have any questions or want to know any more information about the workshop, please just send us an email on communication@launch2020.eu. All right, I think we still have a few minutes for some questions to Jessica and John. Bart, would you like to ask a question or two?
Yeah, that's fine. I'm also looking to the chat, so if the audience has some questions for John, Jessica, please please do so in the chat. I wouldn't switch towards the menti.com, given we still have 3 minutes left, Anastasia. So turning that a little bit, I would jump towards one of the questions that we would like to ask to John and Jessica as well, right? I mean, we're now in a very particular situation, right? COVID-19, a lot of distress in daily life, business life, lots of changes, lots of uncertainty. Some are completely rethinking their strategy and approach. Others have a wait and see approach they adopt. But how can we look from that from a sales and marketing perspective? And how can we deal with the current COVID-19 situation? And what you often hear is the following as a kind of implication of COVID-19 on marketing and sales. And I would ask John also to come in and comment on some of those feelings and from his personal experience, reflect on whether that's indeed also how he feels and what that's the case, and how, for example, the decision mapping can help out there that he just previously presented during the webinar. So sometimes a lot of people say customers' decision making is put on hold. So how can you break through that from a sales and marketing perspective? And a second one, customers are so overloaded, also from an operational standpoint, and just have no time for seeing salespeople, for discussing, let's say, mid-term, long-term investments. So those are a couple of feelings that are popping up right now, given the current COVID-19 situation. I was wondering, John, whether you have similar experience and how, for example, the experience with the decision mapping can help out there.
Sure. Thanks, Bart. Well, I think, you know, at a personal level, we have not seen any deals fall away because of COVID-19. And in fact, in some cases, which this is extraordinary, the level of communication, you know, on platforms like, you know, Zoom, etc., or My Teams has, in a lot of cases, you know, very much focused our clients. And I know that every deal that we came into in our pipeline at the beginning of the year is still there and will be implemented this year. So, but I do think that you know, balance sheets in certain sectors are going to be stressed, and some of these businesses will be a lot weaker, and any cash that those guys have will be customer facing and rebooting their businesses, and, you know, financing infrastructure, energy infrastructure upgrades paid from savings, I think would be welcomed. And, you know, if it's financed, I think they will be definitely welcomed. Another interesting, you know, component of this is that off-balance sheet treatment could be very attractive to some companies at the end of the year. And I think we'll see this in maybe first, second quarter of next year, where you may have balance sheets of, you know, good cash-rich companies, but the balance sheets may be stressed. And I think that, you know, I think we'll see it by the second quarter of 21. And so you have some things that are happening in the marketplace that actually could really accelerate business pipelines for folks that in this industry. And, you know, I can't stress enough that, you know, more important than ever, you really do need to have a learned systematic process, especially in light of the absence and decrease of face-to-face opportunities by these intuitive sales folks or rainmakers in different organizations. I hope that helps, Bart.
Yeah, sure. Thanks a lot, John, for this insightful comment. And I'm glad you also referred to let's say the decision mapping approach that you learned to apply in practice, and that helped you a lot throughout the years. So learning from your answer that you also relate to specific industries that might suffer more or less, and that's also obviously an important sign that you might, for example, change for now priorities in terms of which sectors to address first, given these circumstances. So that's then relating back to the segmentation and targeting approach that I discussed earlier on. One specific question also for Jessica, also related to, and then I want to close it already a little bit down, unless we still have seeing some very important chat questions appearing. But Jessica, some people obviously also relate to the current COVID-19 situation from a sales and marketing perspective and wonder, should I change my approach? Should I rethink my approaching towards the market? Should I do special things with customers, re-engaging or rethinking my value prop? Uplifting my digital skills? Or do you say, hey, for me, there's not too much I changed in my approach for some reasons? Could you give some highlights of how you look towards that evolution?
Yeah, I mean, I think I would echo John. In the ESCOs that we've spoken to and what we've noticed ourselves, interesting as it sounds, it's actually, I think, or what we've heard is that it's been helping the industry, because a big portion of the problem was getting people's attention and, making them realize that improving things and having a finance solution really was valuable to their organization. And that is a lot, getting people's attention when they are stuck in one place helps. So our own calls before, we'd have to wait, maybe a few weeks. Now, usually not, usually it's within the week. So it's sped up. I think the thing that I will be personally curious to see is, I do not think people will be going back to offices the same way that they were before COVID-19. So the use of office space is likely to change. And if somebody's entire, customer base is offices, then they may see some shifts in priorities from their clients with that, because I don't think the use of office space is returning the same way. There'll be something, but it's not going to be like it is. But just as for now, again, the directed approach is always important. It's equally important now, but it isn't changing before and after that we have particularly noticed.
Thank you so much, Jessica and John, for sharing your insights. And I fully agree, whether the situation in the market will change or whether we will do things differently or not. Either way, having a robust sales process and doing the customer segmentation right always matters. And I hope we managed to illustrate this in this webinar. So I would like to thank you all for participating. And I will state again that, of course, you will receive the slides, and please feel free to send us any questions. Also, please sign up for our upcoming workshop on the sales process. We will send you the link again, and hope to see you soon. Thank you, everyone, and stay safe.
Thank you very much.